Greetings everyone. I hope all of you are doing well today. First of all, I would like to thank for the opportunity for me to deliver the speech today. Before I start my speech, let me ask a question. Have you ever traveled on a flight before? How was the experience and how did you felt about it? Traveling in a transatlantic flight could be a wonderful experience. The services offered on board will make you forget all the problems at home. The welcoming view of the sea will make you feel more relaxed and calm. But what if, on a one fine day, you're traveling in the same flight that you used to travel regularly plummets towards the ocean? Will the pilot be able to save the flight and the passengers before it is too late? It's a life and death situation. The same scenario happened to this particular flight. This flight is Qantas Flight 32, which was scheduled to fly from London to Singapore and to Sydney. This flight was almost crashed due to technical issues, but fortunately, due to the courageous acts of the pilot and the crew, it had been saved before it is too late. So, I'm going to share with you the story of how this flight had been saved and what happened. The title of my speech is A Heroic Action of a Pilot, Qantas Flight 32. So, before we dive into the speech, let me briefly explain the points that I'll be talking about today. First of all, I'll be sharing the specifications of the flight. Second, I will be talking about the catastrophe on board. And finally, I'll be sharing the actions taken by the pilot and the crew to save the flight. Before I start, let me tell you that these skills and cooperation of the pilot and the crew to save this flight is a well-known incident in aviation history. To start off, let me share with you the specifications of Qantas Flight 32. This flight is an Airbus A380, and this flight is also known as the Titanic in the sky. This is because the size of the flight, which is very big, and it's equivalent to the size of the Titanic ship. This flight is equipped with 500 tons of advanced materials. This flight also has 8 powerful computers on board. This flight has 4 engines and it belongs to the aircraft engine company Rolls-Royce. According to aviation experts, this flight can almost fly by its own. Besides that, aviation fans also say that these engines are silent ones. This flight is also very special because it belongs to the Australian aviation pioneer Nancy Bird Walton. This flight is also the first flight to be delivered from Airbus to Qantas. So this is basically about the specifications of the flight. Now let's move on to the catastrophe on board. Like I said earlier, this flight was scheduled to fly from London to Singapore, then off to Sydney. This flight is captained by Captain Richard D. Crispigny and First Officer Matthew Hicks. There is also a second officer present in the flight, which is Mark Johnson. Besides them, there are 2 check captains on board, and their job is to review the performance of the crew. There are 469 passengers on board this flight. At first, everything went well at the first leg, which is from London to Singapore. The problem starts when the flight is in the second leg from Singapore to Sydney. At first, the flight departed and cruised up to its assigned altitude. Everything went well. Suddenly, the crew and the passengers heard 2 explosions And the first thing that the crew noticed was engine 2 on fire. They also find out that the hydraulic, the landing gear, the flap and the slats of the flight was not working as well. Passengers seated near to the wings of the flight also noticed that there is a hole in the edge of the wing and fuel is streaming out of it. This is a very chaotic situation and something needs to be done to save the flight. So this is basically the catastrophe on board, and we'll be moving to the final part where I'll be sharing with you the actions taken by the pilot and the crew to save the flight. The first thing that the pilot did was he looked or monitored at the electronic central aircraft monitor, which is known as ECAM, and this is used to monitor any issues or technical defaults in the flight. The crew also tried to put out the fire using the extinguishers on board, but it failed to work as well. Then the pilot tried to level out the plane and lowered the plane to a safer altitude. The crew and the pilot quickly discussed what to do, and they decided to return back to Singapore Changi Airport, because they know that that is the only choice they could do. After 1.5 hours on air, they finally managed to land on Singapore Changi Airport, but it was a close call because they are 100 meters off the runway to spare. After landing safely on Singapore, the firefighters came to put out the fire and everyone was safe without any injuries. Moving on, we have come to the final part, which is the conclusion. And although this flight is equipped with advanced technologies and machineries, we also know that emergency could strike anytime and human effort is needed, especially to save the flight from crashing. CRM, which is known as Crew Resource Management, is also very important to make sure that the flight goes well. As a passengers, it is our duty to focus and pay attention to the safety procedures and demonstration provided by the flight attendants. It is important so that whenever there is an emergency, we will be able to save ourselves and the person in our control. So that is all from me. Thank you.